Hindi po naman natin sinasabi na ibukas lang natin yung ekonomiya at huwag na nating pakialaman yung COVID cases. Kailangan po natin both. At nakita po natin na nagbukas po tayo last October at yung dumaan po yung Christmas vacation, hindi po naman umakyat yung COVID cases.
With the country having lost more than 1 trillion pesos since restrictions were put in place last year, NEDA is pushing to place the entire Philippines under modified general community quarantine.
The IATF backs the move, but local governments are apprehensive. The UP Octa research team warns doing so might bring back infections to levels seen during MECQ. Good evening, I'm Gretchen Hall.
And I'm Robbie Alampa. You're watching The Big Story. Government officials continue to butt heads over the proposal to place the entire country under the most relaxed quarantine level.
Some national officials say this move is vital for the economy, yet experts in some local governments believe it's still premature for such a measure. Marian Enriquez with The Big Story.
If the National Economic and Development Authority had its way, it would place the entire Philippines under MGCQ by March. Acting Chief Carl Chua hopes this would address hunger and income loss.
Hindi po naman natin sinasabi na ibukas lang natin yung ekonomiya at huwag na nating pakialaman yung COVID cases. Kailangan po natin both.
Palace and IATF spokesperson Harry Roque supports this move.
Mas matimbang po ngayon yung mga kababayan natin na nagugutom na nasa 23.7 million, yung ating additional na naghirap na mga kababayan na 4.5 million, yung mga karagdagang nawalan ng trabaho at 2.7 million.
Aside from Metro Manila, 7 other areas in the country are under general community quarantine. Under the proposal for a more relaxed quarantine, sitting capacity in public transportation will be increased from 50 to 75%. There will be more provincial buses and bike lanes, and those aged 5 to 70 years old will be allowed to go out. Face-to-face classes in low-risk areas will also be resumed. But some mayors have qualms. Navotas Mayor Toby Chanco asks, can the healthcare system handle another surge amid the threat of the UK variant?
Baka naman pwede na intayin muna yung masimulan yung bakuna bago tayo magdesisyon sa bagay na.
Marikina Mayor Marcy Teodoro wants clearer protocols.
I think that is what is lacking at this point in time. Clearer, a definitive health protocol, a stricter health protocols towards MGCQ.
The UP Octa research team warns Metro Manila infections could spike to 3,000 if restrictions are eased. Metro Manila currently has an average of 400 cases daily.
We may need to go back to ECQ or MECQ. And this will be very, very costly for NCR if we go back to MECQ.
For healthcare professionals, there's a lot to consider before implementing this move.
Pero ang tanong po, has the government already done its part in terms of making sure that everyone is safe? Are there transportation systems in place that are safe? Okay na ba yung contact tracing natin? Para nating pinapalabas sa gera yung mga tao na wala naman silang pananggalang.
Health experts remind the public that whatever the decision will be, Filipinos should never put their guards down. For News 5, Marian Enriquez, we are One News.
NEDA Acting Chief Carl Chua noted the need to address high hunger rates with the shift to a more relaxed lockdown, but where did all this stem from? Chua said quarantine restrictions put in place last March cost the country no less than 1 trillion pesos. This is equivalent to some 2.8 billion pesos in salaries lost or an annual income loss of 23,000 pesos per worker. Chua added that the country was able to weather the partial reopening done last October and the Christmas season without having seen a major spike in cases.
These are the other big stories tonight. The government has yet to finalize any vaccine deals, but as early as now, AstraZeneca and Moderna say they're no longer accepting orders for their COVID-19 shots. The vaccine czar admits a possible shortage until the second quarter. The Supreme Court, sitting as a presidential electoral tribunal, unanimously juxtaposed protests filed by former Senator Bongbong Marcos against Vice President Leni Robredo. And as a precautionary measure, residents of Taal Volcano Island are now being forced to evacuate. Taal Volcano is now at alert level 1 with almost 100 tremor activities recorded in the past 24 hours. These big stories after the break.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. AstraZeneca may have been granted the World Health Organization's emergency use listing, but it can no longer commit additional doses to the country due to supply issues. What happens then to the 17 million doses it promised to deliver to the country? Greg Gregorio with the details.
AstraZeneca's vaccines may now be distributed worldwide. The World Health Organization has included its COVID-19 shots in its emergency use listing.
WHO gave emergency use listing to 2 versions of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, giving the green light for these vaccines to be rolled out globally through COVAX.
This is welcome news for the Food and Drug Administration. The Philippines expects at least 5.5 million AstraZeneca shots via the COVAX facility, although there's no certainty yet on its arrival date.
Technically, wala naman ng impediment sa pagbigay ng COVAX facility ng AstraZeneca dito sa Pilipinas.
But as Presidential Advisor for Entrepreneurship Joey Concepcion reveals, AstraZeneca and Moderna are no longer accepting additional orders due to supply issues. But he clarifies the country's advance orders through tripartite agreements will still be fulfilled.
So the 17 million doses that the private and the LGU order is on track to be delivered on time. So yung 2.6 to 2.8 million will be first, May and June yan. Yung balance nun will be in the third quarter.
Concepcion says private players now eye procuring shots from American drug maker Novavax. But vaccine czar Carlito Galvez anticipates problems in global supply until the second quarter.
More or less, meron po tayong total na 13.2 billion na capacity for 2021. Makakahirapan po rin tayo dahil kasi yung karamihan ng mga Western vaccine ay ginagamit po ng mga taga-Europe at saka sa Amerika po.
The palace assures the country has ample vaccine resources to meet its target of 170 million doses. This despite Galvez revealing earlier that the country has yet to sign a supply agreement with any vaccine maker. For now, health experts stress the strict observance of minimum health protocols in spite of recent case downtrends. For News 5, Greg Gregorio, we are One News.
Let's circle back to our big story with NEDA recommending that restrictions be eased to MGCQ by March. To speak with us more about this, joining us tonight is Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles. Secretary Nograles, welcome to the big story.
Magandang gabi sa iyo, Robbie. Magandang gabi sa lahat ng mga nanonood ngayon.
Nga po. Secretary Nograles, we're reporting this as a recommendation from NEDA. How close is that to actually being policy?
Well, ultimately, si Pangulong Duterte yung magdedesisyon. It will be up to him to decide. The IATF is merely recommendatory. And because we are an interagency task force, that means we take into consideration the inputs from the health sector and even our economic team. So ito yung pinag-uusapan na nga natin that we're already on National Action Plan Phase 3, then going into the next phase, which is the vaccination rollout. And we've always stated naman na sa Phase 3 ng National Action Plan, we really have to balance the health needs of the health sector and the economic needs of our people as well. So as we move and transition towards the vaccination rollout, we have to be we have to reopen the economy even more, no? In preparation also for more vigorous movement ng ating ekonomiya, especially once we start rolling out the vaccines.
In striking that balance between lives and livelihood, as nabanggit nyo nga po, we will still consult the public health sector and also the economic managers. What about the private sector and local governments? Will they have a voice in here? I asked Secretary because yesterday we spoke with a lot of mayors in Metro Manila, and they were also speaking on behalf of the private sector with whom they were interfacing, and they said they were never consulted on the other significant move, to the other recommendation to reopen cinemas. And they said they were never consulted.
Well, actually, when it comes to the private sector, we are also hearing a lot of clamor from the private sector, especially from the industries that were greatly affected by these restrictions. No? So we have divided the whole industry into 4 categories. No? And we know that category number 4 is the one that is most affected. This is where most of the tourism and entertainment industries or businesses fall under. So what we have been doing is, as far as category 1 and 2 and 3 are concerned, we have been slowly opening it up some more. Well, especially category 3, no? Kasi category 1 and 2 are the essential industries. So they've been open regardless of community quarantine classification. But for category 3, we've been opening it even more and more safely, I might add, para makabalik at makabigay tayo ng hanapbuhay at trabaho sa ating mga kababayan who are in that category. No? But in category, so after we're done with category 3, we're now moving to category 4. Okay. So this is where we're seeing some reactions, no? From LGUs that have been in GCQ for the longest time. Yes. And I'm really talking here about NCR. For the longest time, it's been NCR has been the one that has been most restricted among all of the other localities. But mind you, syempre yung basis namin dito are localities that have been less and less restrictive. And tulad ng cinemas, sabihin natin sa cinemas, we have already granted MGCQ areas 50% capacity for cinemas, and we haven't seen any super spreader events so far, no? That's because of adherence to the health and safety protocols na sinusundan naman ng both ng patrons ng cinemas and the management ng cinemas. So right now, we're now moving towards yung mga areas na GCQ, and ito na nga, we are now setting forth the guidelines and allowing these industries to open some more para makapagbigay tayo ng hanapbuhay sa mga naapektuhan. With regard to if they were consulted, well, number 1, yung guidelines, subject to guidelines. That's why we issued a resolution na subject to guidelines. Kasi isa sa pinal pa natin ang guidelines. And that really means consultation with the stakeholders, and that necessarily means mga LGUs. And number 2, represented naman po ang Metro Manila mayors doon sa loob ng IATF. nandyan po yung mga MMDA officials natin, and we open an invitation to Metro Manila mayors to attend. And in fact, might I add, there was one Metro Manila mayor who was representing them, no, in that meeting.
Okay. Secretary Carlo Nograles, maraming salamat po. That was Cabinet Secretary Carlo Nograles. After his threat, in the meantime, we're moving on to another story on the Visiting Forces Agreement was likened to extortion. President Rodrigo Duterte slammed Vice President Leni Robredo and Senator Ping Lacson. Duterte said the chief executive is the chief architect of the country's foreign policy. He then said Robredo is not fit to be president and should take a refresher course on the Constitution. The president also took a swipe at Lacson. He said he was not sure if the senator pretended ignorance. In a live briefing tonight, Robredo pushed back against the president's claims, saying it is not for him to decide her qualifications.
Hindi naman siya yung magdedesisyon kung qualified ako o hindi. Pero yung taong bayan yung magdedesisyon.
For his part, Senator Lacson reminded the president that according to the Constitution, senators do have a big say in international agreements.
Church leaders are making the necessary adjustments for Lenten season for a second time this year. The CBCP is urging Catholics, especially the vulnerable ones, to attend Ash Wednesday Mass online. JC Cosico with the story.
Tomorrow's observation of Ash Wednesday will be like no other. From take-home ashes to a new method of application. Over in Quiapo, church leaders led the burning of old palms. They will hold 11 masses for the occasion. The Catholic Bishops' Conference of the Philippines says ashes can be sourced from dried branches or leaves of any plants or trees, since it may be difficult to find old palm branches at this time.
Kaya meron sila ngayong option na kahit na anong uri ng halaman o kahoy ay pwedeng gawin ng simbahan na abo.
In Makati, personnel at the Santuario de San Antonio Parish were busy preparing take-home holy ashes. This will be given for free to those unable to physically attend masses due to COVID-19. Officials say each plastic sachet would be enough for 5 household members. They will also receive a prayer guide. The head of the family will administer the ashes.
Para people doesn't really have to come here, go out of their homes, no? They can do this at home.
So ito isang pamamaraan para mabigyan din sila ng opportunity na i-commemorate nila yung Ash Wednesday.
Ashes will also be sprinkled on the head instead of the usual cross on the forehead. Cotton balls will be used for those who will opt for the traditional marking. But some Catholics are split on the new normal Ash Wednesday celebration.
Pwede na rin siguro. Nasa ano naman yung pananampalataya naman di ba?
Kailangan pakros pa rin.
Bakit po?
Yun na nakaanohan natin, nakagisnan. Dapat yun na lang. Bakit ibubudbud naman? Kung ilipad pa yun, wala na.
For the CBCP, the deviations will not affect the essence of Ash Wednesday.
But then because of this pandemic, nagkaroon tayo ng latitude, may leeway na ibinibigay ang simbahan para maingatan din po tayo.
The CBCP is urging the faithful, especially senior citizens and those with comorbidities, to just attend masses online. For News 5, JC Cosico, we are One News.
Time for an express look at some of the day's big stories. New cases of the African swine fever were detected in Misamis Oriental and Cagayan de Oro City. So far, around 650 pigs have been culled in these areas to contain the disease. The Agriculture Department assures that pork supply from Mindanao will not be affected, as other areas like General Santos City, Soc-Sargen, and South Cotabato can fill the gap. The University of San Carlos in Cebu condemns the police raid of a Bakwit school of Lumads in their campus. USC President Father Narciso Celian Jr. said the PNP failed to coordinate with them ahead of what the police claim as a rescue operation. Celian said Lumad children were merely seeking refuge inside the campus and are not being held against their will. Residents of Taal Island have been evacuated after the PHIVOLCS detected seismic activity from Taal volcano. Rescued residents were from 2 sitios in Talisay. The Philippine Coast Guard and local authorities are also conducting inspections around the island as a precautionary measure. And as of this morning, 98 tremor episodes were recorded in the area. Time for another quick break. When we return, Vice President Leni Robredo says truth prevailed after the Presidential Electoral Tribunal junked the poll protest filed against her by former Senator Bongbong Marcos. And chess master Wesley So deals the reigning chess world champion a heartbreaking loss. More details on that later.
Good evening. You're still watching The Big Story. I'm Robbie Alampay. After nearly 5 years, the electoral protest of former Senator Bongbong Marcos against Vice President Leni Robredo comes to an end. Dale De Vera with the details.
In a historic move, the Presidential Electoral Tribunal has reached a decision on Bongbong Marcos's 4-year poll protest against Vice President Leni Robredo.
The Supreme Court, sitting as the Presidential Electoral Tribunal, unanimously dismissed the electoral protest filed by former Senator Bongbong Marcos Jr. against Vice President Leni Robredo.
7 out of the 15 magistrates concurred to dismiss the electoral protest. The other 8 justices agreed with the results.
The deliberations of the tribunal is strictly confidential and it is privileged. So I can only provide you with the information which I said earlier.
According to News 5 sources, the Supreme Court said Marcos failed to allege specific acts showing electoral fraud. Sources add that the allegations were laden with generic and repetitious claims and gave no information on the time, place, and manner of the supposed irregularities. In his electoral protest, Marcos asked the tribunal for 3 causes of action. First, the losing candidate claimed hash codes were changed in the Commission on Elections Transparency server, which led to an increase in Robredo's votes. But COMELEC clarified the change was only cosmetic. The first cause of action was dismissed more than a year after. This led to the second cause of action, a manual recount in more than 36,000 precincts where Marcos alleged fraud. A recount was conducted in 3 pilot provinces picked by Marcos, Iloilo, Negros Oriental, and Camarines Sur, but it only led to Robredo widening her lead by 16,000 votes. With this, Robredo's camp insisted that the petition be dismissed. Source says because there was no substantial recovery from the second course of action, the PET decided to mark an end to the long-winded protest today. This means that Marcos's third cause of action, which was to annul votes from Lanao del Sur, Basilan, and Maguindanao due to alleged fraud, is also effectively dismissed. In a live briefing tonight, Robredo welcomed the PET resolution.
Ngayong araw na naig yung katotohanan. Grabe yung parang sigh of relief na unanimous yung desisyon. Kasi alam naman natin kung ano yung narrative na pinapalabas. And the fact na unanimous yung decision, malaking bagay yon para makamove on na tayo lahat.
For News 5, Dale De Vera, we are One News.
Let's take a look at the biggest stories on print and online. From the Philippine Star, President Duterte is granting amnesty to members of rebel groups MILF and MNLF who are facing criminal charges. The amnesty provides that criminal liability for acts committed in pursuit of political beliefs will be extinguished. The two separate proclamations were signed on February 5 but released to the media only today. Remittances slipped by 0.8% in 2020 as some OFWs lost their jobs, while others tightened their belts due to the pandemic. Business World reports that this is the first annual contraction in 2 decades. Cash remittances stood at nearly $30 billion last year, slightly lower than 2019 figures, according to the central bank. And from News 5, as oral arguments on the controversial anti-terror law continue, Chief Justice Diosdado Peralta asks if it's high time to revise detention laws. Petitioners question an ATL provision allowing detention for up to 24 days without a warrant. But Article 125 of the revised penal code only allows up to 36 hours. The Supreme Court will resume oral arguments on February 23. And time for the big story in sports. Philippine-born U.S. chess master Wesley So conquered reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen in the Euro Opera Rapid Finals on Monday. So capitalized on Carlsen's empty sacrificial move after fighting in thrilling draws in the next two before coming 4 moves away from checkmating Carlsen in the final game. The Philippine-born World Fisher Random Champion apologized to Magnus for ruining his Valentine's Day. Saw amassed $70,000 or 3.3 million pesos in earnings from the chess tour.
Now, would you believe that with more than 109 million COVID-19 cases worldwide, all that virus, everything causing the infection, will actually fit in a can of soda? A 330 milliliter can of fizzy drink, to be exact. British mathematician Kit Yates says the devastation boils down to an incredibly small volume of material. Yates says the SARS-CoV-2's diameter is about 100 nanometers or 1,000-fold thinner than a human hair. He computed its volume then, multiplied it to the estimated number of virus particles, and voila, a soda can will still be below half full even if all infections are accounted for.
Oh my God.
And that's amazing.
Would you want to drink a soda after watching that? Maybe we can make a viral commercial with it.
That is incredible. But you're still learning so much about this virus.
Amazing. All of that can fit in a can, but it has affected the whole world. Wow, wow, wow. Well, that wraps up today's big story. My name is Gretchen Ho. Catch us again tomorrow at 8 p.m. on Signal Channels 8 and 250.
Please like our Facebook page, One News. For more in-depth analysis, visit our webpage, onenews.ph. I'm Robbie Alampay, and we are One News. Good evening.